Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This is just the Moving Iron Podcast. This is brought to you by John Deere. I want to introduce Greg Machinery Pete Peterson. Not that he needs to be introduced to come on the Moving Iron Podcast. He's there every week talking about what's happening in the world of equipment. Greg, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well. How are you, Casey?
I'm doing good, I want to, first, before we get started, I think this is probably one of those things that's one of those kind of puts a little importance of life out there. I want to put my thoughts and prayers out to all the folks down in Texas that have lost people in those floods, and that's a tragedy, and it's a crazy, one of those acts of God that come out of nowhere, and it's a perfect thing happened at the wrong time, and my heart goes out to those people in Texas. So if you have a chance to have a prayer for them, make sure you do that this week. Because it's a bad deal, and I can hardly put myself in those parents' shoes that lost those kids. So thoughts and prayers go out to those people in Texas.
Yeah, that was I was on the radio the other day, Casey, and same thing. It's hard to imagine. We have our two little girls are now in their 30s, mid 30s, but I remember dropping them off at Bible camp.
Yeah.
In the summer, how excited they were. And our little camp down the road here, Spring Valley, Minnesota, sits by a river, and they just come back, and just unimaginable. Yeah. So like you said, thoughts and prayers to all involved. They're just horrific.
Yeah. It's a crazy thing that happened there. All right, Greg, let's talk a little about what's happening in the marketplace. I think this is one of those times of year when you start looking at some stuff roll through, and you see some more auxiliary things on the farm get looked at for purchase, and you start looking towards the end of the year what that might look like. And one of those things are compact utility equipment and compact construction equipment, those kind of things. And skid steers are one of the first things that pop up in my mind when I start thinking about that. Right now, if you look at the construction equipment marketplace, skid steers, there's always skid steers out there on the market for sale. As you're watching that market, Greg, it's hard to believe that a new skid steer could be north of $100,000, definitely north of $80,000 on the smaller ones. But I guess as you're looking at the marketplace there, what are you seeing with skid steers right now, and how do you feel the health of that marketplace is?
Well, I think, Casey, with used skid steers, I think auction pricing fell fairly significantly last year in 24. It was very high volume. I think in 25 here, we just passed the halfway point. I would say maybe finding some footing, and I'm with you on the cost of everything, I guess, not just skid steers. But I know folks might remember I shared a auction price result, I think maybe like 10 days ago, of my way in Minnesota. I think it was Georgetown, Minnesota. Pfeiffer's auction had the sale, and I think it was a 24 model Deere 335 P tier. Like 275 hours on it, give or take. I thought that sold really well at $94,000 hard cash. I only found one listed for sale by a dealer in our machinerypete.com website, and that was a 25 model with 3 hours. I think it was in Illinois. Dealer asking like $115,900 asking price. So for hard cash, 1 year older with 270 more hours to go 94. Again, I think auction pricing is a little stronger here in 25 than it was last year.
Yeah, for sure. And if you just like what you just said there, I mean, that spread probably not as bad as it could have been for that stuff. But again, I think if you look at kind of something we talked about like last week when we talked about side by sides, those kind of things, skid steers are kind of another one of those machines that when you look at where they land up, kind of that midlife range. Because you have they come from two different spots, right? You've got either the farmer goes out and buys a brand new one from the dealership, or it's coming out of the construction marketplace, which typically those will have 2,500 to 3,000 hours, something like that, in a very short amount of time, 3 to 5 year old machine. You see those come into the place, but when they kind of hit that mid-level range, that rate of depreciation really slows down, and you start seeing kind of a stabilizing of the marketplace that's out there. And as I look at it, the amount of creature features that you see on top of these machines anymore. I mean, air ride seats. Remember my first skid steer I got in when I was helping a construction guy in my town I was growing up in, by the time you got done driving that thing, it felt like someone beat you with a baseball bat.
Right.
And now they've got them to where they're pretty well, a little more cushion in them than they used to have. so as you're looking at those things kind of roll in, it kind of feels like that midlife machine has a lot less depreciation and kind of stabilizes out a lot sooner.
Yeah, I think you're right, Casey. And I see similar patterns with the skid steer auction pricing that we see with, tractors and to a little bit lesser extent combines, but that is a little bit older, good condition. Given what's happened with the cost of new, just so astronomical, it does make the really nice, slightly older ones when they do show up, very attractive. So I remember we filmed an auction Northeast Iowa here for our TV show maybe a month ago, and it wasn't a big sale, but the guy, he was a farmer, but also a business owner, and he'd retired, but he had a bunch of stuff that had super low hours. So he had an '09 Deere 325 skid steer with I can't remember. It was like under 300 hours total. So we knew it was going to be hot, but I think the highest auction price hard cash I'd seen on a 325 was like 28.5, and that one brought 36. But it was interesting. The auctioneer Joel Everett there with Joel's Tractors and Auction, when they got to the skid steer, they paused a little bit and they said, "Hey folks, now this is kind of interesting, but this '09 model was loaded up with like every option," which they said was very unusual for 16 years ago on that particular model. But again, it was palpable how many people wanted that thing, and 36,000, yeah, it's a big check, but for hardly any hours on it, and what are you going to pay for a new one, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what it always comes back to, right? What's the new one cost? I think that makes a big impact on the value that you see there. One other thing too, you're starting to see a lot more pop up on the farm as well is just the regular size, full size construction equipment, especially things like obviously wheel loaders. I've been a part of farming operations for a long time, but you've seen a lot more excavators. You've seen a lot more wheel loader motor graders. Those kind of things pop up. Talk a little bit about, I know machinerypete.com, you can go look at auction values, and there's a lot of construction equipment in there, Greg. As you're looking through that, talk a little bit about some of those machines that you're seeing out there on the marketplace right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, Casey. The wheel loaders, the dozers, the mini excavators, all that stuff. I haven't written about them a lot over the years, the auction pricing, but I've compiled it all since day one, so 35 plus years. And when you go into the website, construction equipment, it's actually like our third biggest category. So price wise, again, I think 24 was a little soft. I think, it's interesting because on the one hand, you got a farm auction. So a farmer might have a dozer, mini X, whatever. We see those, but of course we cover all auctions. So, the big construction auctions that are pulling from contractors. And I know 24 was such a weird year. The last half of the year, everyone was just in a holding pattern. Waiting for the election, basically, which way are we going to go, that whole thing. So on the construction side, I think a lot of jobs were kind of in limbo, so to speak. And contractors, I suppose if you're a contractor, you got to order your equipment years in advance in anticipation of what you're going to need. And what we saw last year was a lot of like brand new skid steers, brand new mini excavators and excavators, wheel loaders hitting the auction market. Now that's less this year. I think as 25 has played out, the pricing has firmed up a little bit. And so, yeah, I would say we've seen some pretty strong prices on some good wheel loaders. Mini excavators, if they're used in good condition on the farm side, there's still, good demand there. I think maybe farmers look at a piece like that, yes, how can I use it on my farm? But maybe $1 are tight. Maybe I can use it to make a few bucks, helping a neighbor with a job or something. So there's some kind of two-way utility involved. And of course, farmers are sharp as they come. So, I've always been fascinated by the kind of the crossover with the heavy equipment into our ag world.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking about auctions, we got a good partner of ours coming on here named Alex Kerr from Kerr Auction is going to come on and talk about what's happening in his space and a couple of sales he has coming up. So we'll bring him on here right now. Alex, how you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, glad you could be part of it. I think it's going to be good to get some insights about what's going on out there in the space and go from there. But before we get too carried away, Alex, introduce yourself and what Kerr Auctions is.
I'm Alex with Kerr Auction, and we're in Western Illinois, is where we're based out of. We're in about 6 states right now and still growing. We run every form of auction. We're not online only. We're not in person only. We've done virtual. Pretty much whatever the market needs in that area is what we've done. And our personal bidding platform, we don't have a buyer penalty on. So if you click the button and it says you paid $100,000, you paid $100,000. No penalty for being the high bidder. Premium's what you win at the state fair.
I've never heard it put that way. That's good. That's a good way to put it, Alex. That is true. The buyer's premium that's out there, you see that. You're seeing more and more of the buyer premium get put into the mix for sure. So,
hey folks, we need to do a little shout out to our friend Alex here with Kerr Auction. From my vantage point, clearly the fastest growing auction company in North America. Alex, you came to this space with a long history, of course, on the farming side, but also as a buyer and seller of used equipment. But Kerr Auction, I mean, you're just like a little over a year in, and you're up 6. Is it 5 or 6 states you have sites in now?
6. Yep, 6. And we
decided to become Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, and I love Wyoming. Out there by Scotts Bluff, it's beautiful. And that area I've never been anywhere where we jumped into an auction. Most of the time we're playing in somebody else's sandbox and somebody's not happy that we're there. But Wyoming was just like, they welcomed us wide open, giant crowds. We walk into Pizza Hut wearing our stuff and they're like, oh, are you excited for tomorrow? You do that around Mount Sterling and you're just another auction company. There's one on every corner here. So I don't know. Casey's area was in need.
For sure. Yep. There's not a whole, there's auction companies out here, but there's not as many as when you get back into the, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. There's quite a few auction companies out there.
Yeah, Alex, how have you been able to grow at this clip 1 year in to get where you guys are now? You're in mid-25.
We've got some really good people that happen to work for us, and you assemble the right team and things are possible. We had the network of all those sites are all pretty much jockeys. So guys that I knew from buying and selling equipment that, their stuff wasn't moving either. And they all had customers that needed to sell stuff. And we basically partnered with them to get a site in each of those locations to build around. And the challenge has been as you go east to the licensing. So going west, they're just happy to have you. Going east, like Pennsylvania, it's like, okay, well, here's 1,000 hoops. Good luck having a sale here. But we managed to get it pulled off.
Sure. For sure. Well, you have a unique sale coming up here, Alex. I think it's worth highlighting. You've got this sale August 14th, and you're primarily focusing on an export sale, which I've been around auctions a lot in my life, and there's always export buyers on there, but you're primarily focusing on that. So I guess talk a little bit about that sale and how you came up with the idea to do something like that.
So when I started this, like Greg said, we're trying to grow from almost nothing. And when I would walk into a deer dealership or a case dealership, and they would say, hey, what can you offer me that we're not already happy with? They're dealing with one of the major 5 national auction companies, and they're happy. There's no reason to leave some of them. They're doing a great job, and they got way more experience than I do. And so I started thinking, well, what can we offer that is different? And that was when I came up with the get big, get the different states, and we'll put your stuff in the place where it best succeeds. Certain things bring more in Pennsylvania than they do in Wyoming. Certain things bring more in Wisconsin than they do in Central Illinois. And the farmers will discount your trucking way more than what it actually costs to move it. The other thing I came up with was specialized sales do well. So, like you guys were talking construction, if you have one skid steer or one excavator on a consignment sale, it doesn't do very well. But if you have a construction focused sale, it does well because you've got buyers, they'll fly in to see one of 5 excavators. They won't fly in to see one. And we got thinking that the export buyers, they hate some of the auction things that they're dealt with. So they don't speak the language. You have to talk to them maybe at 10 o'clock on WhatsApp. They have
Sure.
an online only presence where they'll just turn around and here's a pin drop. You've got 14 days to have it removed. Well, you're 3,000 miles away. How comfortable are you with that? You know, they don't trust that you're going to remove the fire extinguishers off of a combine or that you even know the right. They have different questions. Does it have this? Does it have that? An American farmer would never ask you that. And so we had a good relationship with the Christopher family that owns MMS that puts all this stuff in containers. They had a site in Illinois and they had one in Hinkinson, North Dakota. So we're going to go to North Dakota to do this. And they have got the contacts to every person, every email, everybody that has basically ever shipped something in the containers or out of the port that went through them, they've got access to. And I pitched I came up with it driving down the road. I'm like, why don't I just do a sale with them? They've got the buyers. Instead of normally we're looking to try to make sure that people know, we're going to be able to send out an email and everybody that's looking to export that stuff is going to be there. We'll probably try to get them registered to bid on our site so they don't have to pay anything extra, but we'll also run it on some of the other platforms just because we don't want to miss anybody. But that was the idea that I came up with, put together a specialized list of what is going to leave this country in the next 6 to 8 months and maybe doesn't have a strong U.S. buyer anymore. There's certain stuff that you sell it new, you sell it to the next tier down, and after it's 10 years old, if it's 40 foot or bigger, say in a draper head, there may not be a U.S. buyer left for it. You know, the smaller stuff goes to Pennsylvania or Wisconsin. But that stuff that originated in the Corn Belt, there's just not a buyer for some of this stuff after it gets to a certain age. And that's where we need to be able to export it. The other thing we thought was the day that war ends in the Ukraine, they will show up and clean us back out. And so this sale doesn't have to be that big. We wanted to do it to get a feel for it, introduce it. A year from now, we're hoping it's a huge thing.
Yeah. No, I think from the export side of it, I mean, I've exported a lot of stuff in my career, and it is a best way to put this, it's a labor of love, right? It takes just what you're talking about, right? You got a lot of hoops to jump through. You got a lot of understanding what's going on, understanding what needs to go where in what country, because every country is a little bit different as far as how you get stuff in there and how you get stuff out of there, so on and so forth. And you're right. I mean, the majority of the people that you're selling stuff to is they're kind of at a dysfunction a little bit of disadvantage a little bit, because they're paying for it all up front and they're looking at the pictures that you're sending them, right? So I know what my response to that would be. I would have a hard time trusting everybody until you built out that relationship up. That's a long-term thing where you can say, hey, when Casey said it was going to have X, it showed up with X and it worked like it's supposed to, and so on and so forth, and going on from there. And I think that's the key to what you're talking about there, Alex, is that you building that trust with those customers and move things forward there. I think the other good thing about the auction that you're putting together is not everybody wants to deal with an export situation. You're offering a service now that's going to open that door up to say, hey, let us take care of this for you. You just give us some machinery that we can help sell it, push that through that scenario. And I think that's a very unique option for a lot of folks out there.
And folks, I think you're getting an insight here into why Kerr Auction is growing at the clip it's growing, because as Alex is verbalizing here, no stone left unturned. How can we be different? How can we be better? And Alex, I know I'll be coming down for your big sale in Mount Sterling end of this month, was July 29th. Um, and another example, so the night before the auction, you actually put on a dinner, and it honestly it blew my doors off the first time I came down. You had me down for that, and I mean, huge crowd, and you're taking care of your bidders, your sellers, and just fostering a great evening. I think Tyne Morgan is coming down this year, and we'll be there filming the auction for our Machinery PTV show. So what you've done in short order, again, just fabulous. My hat's off to you.
Yeah, so that sale's actually 3 sales in 2 days. So we've got the Scott Market retirement sale on the 28th, and then we've got an online only tool sale. We had guys that had retired that talked about, well, I still got all the stuff in my shop and I didn't do anything with it. And I'm like, well, don't put a little bit of stuff on consignment sale. We'll put all your stuff together and we'll have an online only tool sale. So it's going to run simultaneously to the machinery sale, almost like a second ring, but it's online only. That's on the 29th. We've got the Cook family retirement, one owner 4440. There's some unique stuff on that sale. And then, like you said, the night of the 28th, Tyne and Bridget Riddell will be here and speak that night. I mean, you're welcome to walk up there and say hi, but I'm not paying you this time. No response.
Yeah, I'll just happily be part of the crowd, Alex. You put on a great event. Free pancakes, free ribeye sandwiches. See, again, you're innovating, Alex. I love it.
Yeah. Yep. Free pancakes and ribeye sandwiches enough for me to go watch the auction. I can tell you that.
If you come up to Minnesota, you have to take that Chiefs shirt off if you come up this way, though.
Well, yeah.
I
know when you get used to just playing in February all the time, it's hard to see that walking around.
Hey, can't argue with your success, man.
You gotta brag about it while you can, because sooner or later it's gonna end. It always does. Always does.
Hey folks, again, we want some nice, unique tractors. We should shout out again on the 29th of July. Alex, you got a pair of Sharp 4440s on your Mount Sterling, Illinois.
That's Scott Market's tractor. I sold him almost everything he's got, and he chose to go a different path in life between losing some family ground and some different stuff. So what's interesting is I wasn't prepared for, when we entered the auction space, the amount of widows and hard conversations you have in this that, are you sure you want to quit? Do you want to continue on? No, I think I'm ready to do something else. Or, we talked to one where, her husband went to work that morning and never came back, and she's trying to figure out how to navigate selling her stuff. It's not easy. You just do your best to try to get them everything their stuff is worth, and somewhat come along as an advisor, like, hey, I know you're thinking about this and you want it over with, but maybe you should wait one more calendar year because you still got all the grain for this year. You're going to have no expense. And I'm my own worst enemy. I cost myself a business. I'm like, hey.
Well, for farmers listening out there, that's what Alex just said. That's all the more reason to pick up the phone and give him and his team a call, because, they're not just selling a piece of equipment. They're looking to partner with you and listen to you, your situation. And then, as you can hear by all these things, Alex, in 1 year in the auction business, of things they're doing to bring you as many, the biggest buying pool they can. So again, I just commend you, brother, for what you've been doing, and fun to watch you guys keep growing.
I really appreciate all your help. I mean, you've promoted us well. Casey, I'm just getting to know you. I've known Greg for years, and it is exciting. Like, we set a record in Pennsylvania on a tractor, but, when it was over, I told people, I'm like, there's nothing we did special. We advertised it well, but it was just an honor to get to sell that guy's tractor. Anybody that sold that tractor would have set a record. It was beautiful. It was low-houred. It checked every box as to why it would set a record. And, so you can't take away anything from anybody else that's doing this. They're all good. sometimes you get the opportunity to sell something special, and then Greg talks about you for the next week on social media and the radio.
Yep.
Well, you give me good stuff. You reach out, you and Gina, your wife, fantastic, sending little video previews. And again, I love how you guys just no stone unturned, Alex. So keep doing what you're doing, and can't wait to get down there July 28th and 9th for your pair of auctions there. That'll be great fun.
For sure. So that's what's the easiest way if folks want to reach out to you? What's the simplest way for them to get a hold of you?
I'm 46 years old, so I prefer actually a phone call still to anything else. So 217-242-9600 is my phone number. You can email me or contact just go to the Kerr auction website, and all our information is on there.
Well, is that kerrauction.com? Is that where that's at?
Kerrauction.com. You also, if you got a Apple or an Android phone, download the app. It's free, and then the bidding is free.
Right on. Good. Well, Alex, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Greg, got any final thoughts? Anything you want to throw out there with Alex before we close it down?
No, just people, hey, if you want to get a hold of me too, just call Alex. And Alex got my number. So he knows how to get a hold of me.
Yeah, if I have a human interest piece, I'll forward you to Greg. He can put you on who knows what.
There you go.
There you go. And Greg, if you want Greg to come speak, easiest way to do that, Greg, just go to machinerypete.com. Easiest way to do that, and hit the contact button there.
Email, phone number there. Just reach out, and always fun to hop out around the country. Heading to North Dakota this week or early next week, and then again, can't wait to get down to watch Alex and his team do their thing end of this month.
Right on. Greg and I both will be up in Rochester. You don't have to go very far this time to be a part of this. Up in Rochester to be part of the Yield Academy. And both of us, where we do in this podcast here, both of us will have a little speaking session to talk about, and that is August 21st, 22nd, I believe, something like that. And you'll be able to see that there. You also go to the Moving Iron Summit. You want to see go visit Alex and his team. They'll be down there at the Moving Iron Summit, September 24th through the 25th. So check us out down in Austin, Texas there. So with that, we'll Alex, appreciate you being on the podcast. Greg, we'll catch you again next week. So with that, more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planner upgrades and see why nothing runs like a deer.
Welcome back to the podcast. Got Sean Hackett here with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida. He's nice enough to come on and talk about what's happening in the world of commodities. Sean, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good from soupy, humid, bug-infested Florida this time of the year. But I'll take it over minus 30 degrees in the wintertime in North Dakota anytime, any day. So, as you can see, I'm a little chilly because the air conditioner in the house is a little below my my comfort zone. But nonetheless,
I can tell you look frigid there.
I am cold.
Yeah. Well, Sean, there's been a wild ride. If you look at grains over here the last 10 days, we saw a run up of about 21 cents. And then we've seen that all run back down here over a number of things. Geopolitical stuff. We've got trade stuff. We've got trade things that were supposed to happen that didn't happen, and those kind of things. And the market's hinging on all this stuff. Right now, if you look at where things are at, the front month corn is just about got a 3 in front of it. And if you look where September corn's at, right now you're looking at somewhere around 417. So, John, as you're taking a look at the marketplace right now, what are you looking at, and what are some of the scenarios you're running through in your head right now?
Well, first of all, let's take a step back and just remember that the grain markets are extraordinarily undervalued relative to all other commodities. That doesn't mean it can't stay extraordinarily undervalued. It just means that we're getting back to our undervaluation similar to what we were at last July and August before we made an important low, as you know, when we turned around. The market has shown two times that it was willing to really, really spike higher in a moment's notice when we had the geopolitical unrest. For example, for wheat, I think we put 60 or 70 cents on wheat in a very short period of time. And then when things come down, the grains came back down and wheat came back down. And then you saw last week, they quickly, put immediate premium on grains, 20, 30 cents on corn, 50 cents on soybeans, 30 cents on wheat, whatever it was. And then of course, Trump, who had indicated he would have exciting things to say, didn't say anything regarding anything to do with increasing grain exports to other countries as of yet. And the market came right back down. So, but what's interesting with those two exercises, Casey, is the market actually is extremely nervous to go up that fast and that quickly on those two triggers. Tells you how uncomfortable the market is being this low, that it doesn't take much of a spark to get them to. So if geopolitics were to get to worsen and stay more adverse, or if we start getting some tangible evidence of increased trade demand, or if the market starts to see either through weather or through harvest that the yields might be a little bit off trend, you could see that these markets could put on a significant move here to the upside and keep going for a while. Like, I mean, the market is antsy. It wants to go higher, but it hasn't gotten that. It's had a couple of sparks, and the sparks got fizzled out. So, but nonetheless, they were both failures to break out, and here we are. So, when every farmer's asking me, what do I do now? What's the downside? How bad can it get? What are we looking at? And so, if you're a farmer that you're sitting here and you need to sell new crop or old crop and or both in August or September, which you're not supposed to do. Last August is the worst time to do it. The August of 2020 was the worst time to do it. I mean, we know August, September is typically not the time you want to be selling grain. So if you're that farmer, if you're that person, this is what we're saying. This is what we would say. There are short-term support levels that we would need to hold to continue to offer opportunity for a counter-seasonal rally. Those levels are 416.5 on December corn, 1011.5 on November soybeans, and I believe it's 546.5 on December SRW wheat. So long as those levels hold on a daily, but most importantly on a weekly closing basis, then the opportunity for a counter-seasonal short covering rally into August is still possible, okay? But if we get a daily and especially a weekly close below those levels, then the odds start to favor that we're going to have a seasonal decline into August into an early harvest low like we typically do. And if that's the case, what could the extreme downsides be based on technical analysis and moving averages and 95% confidence interval charts, which we utilize to help our farmers understand where downsides could be based upon historical context. So we have found that grain markets rarely spend much time ever below the 20-year moving average and the lower end of a 95 confidence interval support line. That's essentially a linear regression that you run on a quarterly basis. It's essentially a 40-year 95 confidence interval range, which means that 95% of the time the market's going to stay in a range, and there's certain levels of support and resistance that it will abide by. It's strictly statistics. It's nothing more, nothing less. If you run that analysis, so let's assume we do break these support levels that I just mentioned. In the next few weeks, we break them. What does that mean? That means that December corn doesn't mean we have to go down to these, but these would be your extreme downside levels. And what would be probably a market trading an above trend line yield, Casey. No trade deals, okay? No geopolitical unrest. That would be that scenario, okay? We're looking at 375 December corn as your extreme support level. We're looking at $9 to $9.50 soybeans on an extreme downside support level. and we're looking at about 510 on the that's November soybeans, and we're looking at 510 on the December SRWE contract. Now, it doesn't mean we have to hit those levels. It just means that would be like if everything goes wrong, we could possibly briefly, maybe for a day or two, hit those levels. And when I mention those levels, if we happen to do that, those on the physical buy side of the market, write those numbers down. And if you get within 5 cents of them, that's your opportunity. If that were to happen, like it was last August, that's your opportunity from a physical buy side. If you're on the buy side of these markets, you need to buy these things. That's your hanging curveball. That's your holy grail opportunity to get something smart done, not for just 6 months, but I'd go out there a year or two on something like that, like we suggested last August at the lows. So that's but let's also keep in the context, Casey, the difference between today and last August. The biggest difference is the dollar is now at 96 and change. Last July we were at, I think, 110 and change, meaning we've had a substantial devaluation of the US dollar relative to other currencies. So it makes reaching those levels even more unlikely that I just mentioned, because we have a much weaker dollar inflating US dollar price commodities. And usually your metals, your gold, your silver, your platinum, which are inflationary hedges, are through the roof today when they weren't through the roof to the same extent back last July. Understand also that the Chinese are printing incredible amounts of money, far, far more than it did a year ago, to reflate their economy, to reflate their real economy, to reflate their demand, to get their assets better in balance against their debts and their imploded real estate market. So just as an example, they have printed 1.5 trillion US dollars equivalent so far this year, which is the largest amount of money printing I believe they've ever done. And on an entire year, it's more than they've already done it in 6 months, and there's no indication that they're done money printing, meaning that they have decided to money print until it works. We know with what we do here and what other countries do, if you print enough money, no matter how dire your situation, you will reflate for a little while, although there's consequences to pay at a later date. So what I mean by so if you run a correlation between Chinese liquidity, the Chinese economy, shipping rates, shipping levels, shipping activity, and commodity prices, the correlation is something along the lines of 0.88, meaning that when they're printing money, within a 3 month to 6 month delay, you will see demand for commodities, demand for shipping, shipping prices going up. You will see their economy improve in that typical 3 to 6 month monetary delay. They started really printing, Casey, like big time here in the first quarter. So if you run that 3 to 6 month window, that means we should start to see the Chinese reflation effect impacting commodities, impacting their economy, impacting the demand for commodities, starting like within the next 30 days and accelerating into the end of the year. We haven't had a Chinese monetary inflation wave since post-COVID, which is the last time they printed money anything close to something like this. And we know what happened after COVID. We had the big move higher, and obviously there's other factors that created a bigger move higher. I'm not necessarily predicting we're going to have that kind of move higher, but nonetheless, so with that going on in China, and every country except for the United States lowering rates, and most countries spending more money fiscally, we're spending more money. The big beautiful bill, whether you love it or you hate it, you think it's good, you think it's bad, maybe it's partly good, partly bad, whatever it is, it still means that we're going to spend a ton more money on stuff, which means you're putting more money into the system. So when I look at all of that happening today versus last July, it makes it makes it not impossible, but it makes it highly more improbable that we can reach this kind of undervaluation we had a year ago in August. And it makes it more unlikely that we would go down and retest the lows that we had back in August, which is essentially the numbers I just gave you. It's kind of a retest of last August, give or take. It makes it extremely improbable that we're going to be able to push the ball, this beach ball, down below the pool of the water for to that level when the water level of the pool is higher, because the higher it is, the harder it is to bring it back down to where you're at. And that's the analogy that I'm expecting. So while I'll never say it can't happen, because the minute you say that, it'll happen because something else came along that we weren't aware of. And when this is not a game about guaranteeing anything or about for sure, for this, for that, we're just trying to lay that's why I'm saying those targets would be your extreme downside objectives if these short-term levels were to break. It would happen, in my opinion, would happen in August. They just blow it all out in August. Trend line yields, here we go. And then we'd find out that the yields are not going to make it quite as good. We still feel that, we're looking at good crops, but slightly below trend. This has been our forecast for a long time. Maybe a bushel per acre below trend on soy, maybe a couple of bushels up to the acre below corn. Those are great crops, by the way. There's nothing bad about those crops. But a bushel to the acre below trend, assuming all else being equal, based on the last USDA report, you would be pushing 220 to 230 million bushel carry out on soybeans. That's pretty tough. You look at the history of how many times we've been that low. That's just one bushel to the acre below current expectations, just one. And if corn is 2 bushel to the acre below trend, 2. That's 180, 181 versus 182. Fantastic crop, by the way. But that may at let's say 86 million harvested acres. So you would have to take 172 million bushels off of the 1.75 billion bushel carryout that they're projecting. 16515. So all of a sudden, if you run that number, you're at between 1.5 and 1.6 billion bushel carryout. Well, gee, it's sort of kind of like where we've been at, and we did find a way and managed a way to convince ourselves that $5 or $5.20 corn, at least for a little while earlier this year, was a decent price. It was a fair price for that kind of a carryout. We know with the renewable diesel mandates that soybeans are going to command millions more acres to be planted, and they're going to end next spring at the expense mostly of corn, then maybe cotton and rice a little bit, but mostly from corn, which means that 95, 96 is probably going to be maybe 92, 93. So then if you run 3 million acres off the top, right? Throw a trend line yield for next year, keeping everything else equal, without anything else happening. We get ourselves down to $1.1 billion, $1.2 billion. We just haven't really got much tighter than that in terms of our minimum pipeline levels. That's for next fall, not this fall, next fall. So we're always looking. Job is always to look ahead. So that's why if the market gets too carried away, if the computer programs, if the algorithms, if the artificial intelligence programs get carried away and they can't control themselves and they want to pressure everything because everything's short term, we're saying we need to go lower, and they do something really, really stupid here, like they did last August, something really stupid here in August. Understand the scenario isn't anywhere near as negative as that price action will try to convince you it is, just like it wasn't like that last August. Think, everyone listening to your show, think of what you were thinking of last August when December corn was $3.85 and September corn was $3.55. And everyone was telling you $3 corn, guaranteed $3 corn back then. Tell me what you were thinking and the optimism you had at that time, and yet just 5 or 6 months later, $5.20 corn, you had futures in the nearby. The market is an insidious weapon of mass destruction of your emotions. Its job is to make the fewest amount of people the most amount of money. I say this to every customer that I talk to. Its job is to get you out at the low and get you in at the high. It's not structured to try to get you to do the right thing. It's trying to, every moment, trying to get you and to grip your fear or your greed, do exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time so that you lose the most amount of money possible. That is the job of the market. The market doesn't care whether you go bankrupt or not. It doesn't care. It wants to destroy at all times. But it also can be a massive, massive venue for prosperity if you understand the market's mission and you think differently. And that's why everything I do, we do, and we've been doing now, since we started our company in 2007, and since I've been on your show, is to try to provide the other side, the counter argument to the herd mentality, and to give you what I believe is historical, statistical, cyclical, and instinctual information that can get you to buy when there's blood in the streets, when no one wants to do it, and it gets you to sell when nobody wants to do it, because the only way that you're going to be in the top 25 percentile of profitable farmers is if you do what most are not doing. And that is very difficult. It's not easy. I'm an outsider looking in. I don't have a farm that I am beholden to, that my life and blood and family are counting on. And I can't imagine having that pressure, having that emotional, the emotions drawing me. I couldn't think straight if I had all that out there at a time. I would be very, very prone to having the market take advantage of me, which is why I exist. I exist because my job is to try to take this appropriate emotional farm operator, and try to provide him a balanced, sensible advice that he can reequilibrate and get himself on a stronger footing so that he can bring more money home on the farm. We would not be wanting to make any major massive amount of sales between here and August if we break down. We will say it again. If you absolutely, positively know deep in your heart, deep in your banker's heart, that you have to sell some old crop or some new crop, and or both, in August or early September, if you know you have to do that, then you might as well do it now, in case those extreme targets that I just mentioned manifest. Do not sell one bushel more. Take a lock and keep, put handcuffs on you, tie yourself to the bed, and don't allow you to get your hand on the sell button on your computer. Because I strongly believe whether we get a counter-seasonal rally in August, which I still think is possible, or not, I do believe that we're going to have much better prices in the fourth quarter and in the first quarter than we have today. And it could be surprisingly better. Just like 520, there wasn't a person on the planet that would have not thrown me in an insane asylum last August if I told them that we were going to have 520 corn in the first quarter of 2025. Everyone would have said, you're absolutely out of your mind. You need to leave the business immediately. And that's what happened, though. So be careful about buying into the narrative. It's very dangerous. Right now, everybody is on the one side of the boat. It's all over. That razor blade to the wrist marketing plan is back in vogue. And I don't mean to make fun of this, but it's really how farmers feel, and it's really how those in my business are making them feel. So that's what I have to say. I don't know if we're going to break down. I don't think we should break down. I don't control the markets. The markets are the markets. But if we are to go down and do this all over again like we did last year, this is not the end, but the beginning of a better time ahead. And what if there's actually a trade deal or trade deals that show increased demand for grains? I know nobody thinks that's ever going to happen, just like they didn't think it was going to happen back when President Trump was first president. No one ever thought it was going to happen, and it didn't, and it took a while, and then happened. But what if it does? We already show how quickly this market could put on 50 cents or $1 just like that. What if the temporary impasse in the Middle East or Russia, Ukraine, or the temporary pause in the action is simply a false flag? What if that region just explodes into even a worse situation at some point? We already showed we could put 80 cents on the wheat market just like that, and the grain market just like that. What if it's actually sustainable and it gets worse? What if the weather in late July and August? I've been saying we're not going to be seeing extreme daytime temperatures. What if I'm wrong? No one's perfect. What if we get some extreme heat and they start worrying about the soybean crop? And soybean, I mean, we know the soybeans could easily put on significant weather premium if that were to happen at that time. What if the warm nights that we're projecting here into the heart of pollination is the USDA and Harvard's results start to show that the crop's going to come in, many bushels below trend as we get into September, October. There's so many what ifs to the upside that could put on 50 cents to $1. Like we've already seen this happen twice because the markets are uncomfortable. They're cheap. They know that we shouldn't be down here, but the trend is your friend, and they're going to keep pushing their friend until it's not your friend. But that's, to me, is like, what if, and what if something happens that we're not even aware of right now? Of course, there's always something we're not aware of that happens. And the dollar, in my opinion, we've been absolutely correct about the valuing dollar that we suggested that would top out in January of this year and fall. We think it's going to continue to unravel into the fourth quarter. We think we could see 90.92 on the US dollar index. What does that mean for commodities? What would that mean for grain markets if we had another notch down from here, into the low 90s, a level that we haven't seen since COVID? What would that do to grain markets? I'm just saying that I see so many opportunities for rallies here that a producer who's patient would have an opportunity to cash sell into. And I see, a possible pathway to lower prices in August, although begrudgingly. And if it does begrudgingly do it, I think it would be a very short-lived affair. In my opinion, the only thing that a producer needs to manage right now is not selling the low, which the farmer unfortunately has a tendency to do, where he sells in August at the low. He sells 3 to 5 futures at the low because he has to. Well, if you're that person that has to, then just move those bushels now, at least at a level that isn't, if you look at what I mentioned, where we are now versus where we could go, if you just at least do that. So you at least, if this happens, you protect yourself against losing that amount, and then throw the rest in the bin. Enjoy your family, enjoy farming, and pray for those in Texas who lost their kids.
Yeah, definitely need to send those thoughts and prayers out to the people down in Texas. That's tragedy.
We can sit here all and talk about markets and things and that, but when it comes down to people's kids at a summer camp suddenly drowning to death, very little in life seems to matter a whole lot as much as we think it means. So I'm not saying what we're talking about today is not important, but ultimately what has just happened is the incredibly great equalizer of all things, and terribly sad situation.
Yeah, very sad situation, but plenty of stuff there to think about, Sean, when you're talking about all the stuff that you laid out there. A lot of scenarios to come into play, a lot of reasons to have a good plan in place. So if folks want to reach out to you, get more information on what you're doing at Hackett Financial, it's an easy way to do that.
Yeah, our website is Hackett, HACKETT advisors.com. Our Twitter page is at Feridex, FERIDEX11. We have we have a LinkedIn page. From time to time, we'll put some stuff out there, some interviews that we do to keep people in tune of how we look at cycle statistics and correlations, and how we make our price forecasting to see if what we do and how we do it might be of value to those that listen and watch your show.
Right on. Sean, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next time.
Sounds good, Casey. Thanks so much.
All right. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron Podcast after these messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you. See you next year, loser. That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like Exact Apply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
All right, welcome back to the Moving On Podcast. We got Glenn Birnbaum here from Fickich. He's a principal there. And Glenn has been on the podcast as you're looking through a lot going on in the world, those kind of things. And we had a shake up in the tax world. We had the one big, beautiful bill and signed into law. And there was some stuff in there that appreciation, those kind of things. So I thought it'd be great to get Glenn back on to weed through what we see happening with that bill and how that's going to affect see out there in the equipment space as well as on the farm. So Glenn, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Casey. It's been a little while, but we're kind of getting the band back together here. So
yes, we are. We sure are. So let's kick this off here a little bit. As you're looking at this bill that got passed, there's about four things that really jumped out at me. There were some campaign policies those kind of things. For example, no tax on tips, tax on food on it. Standard double appreciation, 100% bonus appreciation, those kind of things came back. Started seeing some stuff with some death tax stuff and those kind of things roll through there. So I guess you've a lot of stuff that I'm wanting here, Glenn. Where do you want to start first? What do you think is the biggest?
Well, maybe just a brief little history here. We had the tax bill got passed in December of 2017 and pretty much was effective in 2018 and then through 2025. And then in 2026, next year now, everything was pretty much going to reset, few exceptions, back to what it was. So there was this big push, in 2025 here to deal with these sunset provisions. All this stuff may be expiring. And so, as you said, the bill got passed now, not in December, it got passed July 4th. And so now we've got some certainty into what the rules are going to be going forward, which is huge. And one of those, I think the biggest one is depreciation that we want to talk through. So probably the one that affects most of our smaller clients, not the really huge companies, is what we call the Section 179 expense. And that's something that hasn't gotten a lot of play, but it was a $1.25 million deduction that you got. This could be on either new or used equipment, but now that's increasing to $2.5 million. So it's a huge increase, doubled it, and it is effective in 2025. So now the big companies can't take advantage of this, but it's just nice to have these rules set where you can write off, $2.5 million of equipment, kind of no questions asked. So that's
big. So that's a really big deal because $2.5 million worth of equipment didn't get you very far anymore.
Yes.
Look at the price of equipment. So that $1 million threshold is even lower. So that's really maybe.
When I started my career, I think the number was $25,000. Section 179, which is pushing 30 years.
Yeah.
Now that does phase out. What's a big business? If you buy more than like $6.5 million of equipment, then you would not get any benefit. But it's
so say that again real quick.
For that Section 179 expense, once you go over, it starts to phase out at $4 million of equipment. And then once it hits $6.5 million, you don't get the Section 179 expense. But you get the 100% bonus, which we're going to talk about next. So
you had me like, well, what's the point? So that's fun.
So one of the reasons I talk about this is a lot of states may have decoupled from the 100% bonus depreciation. They don't allow it, but they still may allow the Section 179. So it's kind of the first thing we want to take typically is 179 because it's a deduction both for federal and the state. So, but it depends. So
we're looking at
the big one is 100% bonus. So this has no limit. The biggest companies in the world can take advantage of this. 100% write-off, meaning, immediate deduction. Now the items do have to be placed in service after January 19th of 2025. Okay. So meaning January 20th would be the in-service date that you need to have to be able to take 100% bonus. Otherwise it is 40% bonus depreciation right now.
So that was saying something about research and development in there too.
Yeah.
So if I'm farmer over here and I want to try something, yeah, like I weren't soybeans necessarily, and big screen out there. But I want to try it and see if I can get it to work. Yeah, kind of like research and development.
There's quite a bit of rules to follow, but there are ways that you could make it happen. Typically you need to have like an outside firm like hired to make sure you're doing it the right way. But yeah, it's becoming a little bit more common on the farms. If you do it the right way, you got to document everything properly. Wages and that type of thing. What really is the time you're experimenting versus just planting the corn, for example. But yeah, that's a big deal as well. Because basically, Casey, what they said is, yeah, you can still get this research and development tax credit. Again, this was one of these things that came into play in 2022. Actually, one of these things it was okay 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. Then in 2022, they kind of changed the rules. These were already set in the law, but they were set to sunset. And so it basically said you still get the same R&D credit, but you have to amortize your expenses that count towards the credit over 6 years, which really is problematic if you're paying people, to do research, engineering to do research. And so it really hurts some clients in 2022, 23, and 24. But now they're saying, no, we're going to kind of go back and allow you to write off these deductions immediately, at least going forward. And if you're considered a small business, which is typically around $31 million of revenue, you can actually go back to 22, 23 and actually like amend returns and change it back to the way it was. So that's really pretty big deal. So,
Okay. Anything more on that topic you want to cover? Did we hit everything?
On depreciation, the only other thing is that if you're considered a manufacturer or somebody who's in production, this would be farmers already get bonus depreciation typically on like a machine shed because it's considered a 20-year life or less. Okay, so you can get that 100% bonus on the machine shed. But if you're a manufacturer, they now have this new rule in place that instead of it being 39-year property, like if somebody wants to build a manufacturing facility or some sort of production facility, you can write that off in 1 year, which is huge. And so that's the concept of maybe trying to, reshore, get manufacturing back to the U.S. I expect to see some construction activity because of that. Now, if you already have a contract signed and things, we have to look at those rules a little bit closer. But generally speaking, if you started construction after January 19th and it was placed in service after July 4th, you may be able to take this third on your property and make it a 1 year write-off. Yet farmers have always kind of had this because a machine shed counts as 20-year property, but not just your manufacturing business. So that's a pretty big deal.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the gut tax stuff.
Yeah.
Big count. Big count. Big number. We got recorded.
It started out at a lower number. It was $5 million, but now it is, years ago, but now it is going to be $15 million per person. So a $30 million exemption for 2026, and then it's set to, adjust for inflation going forward, and it is permanent in the sense that it doesn't reset, doesn't get cut in half, after a certain number of years. So that's huge. Do be careful of certain states, and Illinois is one of them where the exemption is a lot lower. In Illinois, it's $4 million a person. So more and more states are trying to maybe have their own estate or death tax rules. But yeah, for federal purposes, $30 million for a couple. Big number.
Big deal because so it's a big fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I said a couple other things too. I thought were important. Salt taxes, state and local taxes. Figured into those.
Yeah, the salt tax got a little bit of what the House bill said, what the Senate bill said, but it's now a $40,000 cap. It was going to be a $10,000 cap. So that's your real estate taxes, income taxes typically. But your standard deduction for the individuals for married folks is around $32,000. So, you remember, you've always got to be over that to make it count. So you look at primarily your state and local income taxes and your real estate tax. We call those taxes. Number 2 is mortgage interest on your house. Number 3 is donations. So you got to add all those 3 up. And if you're not over 32,000, then you're going to take the standard deduction. So, but yeah, for folks in high tax locales, it is a nice benefit. Now it does start to phase out once you go over $500,000 of adjusted gross income. Starts to phase out, and then if you're over 600,000, it goes back to $10,000. So, so something to be aware of.
Yep.
Okay.
A couple things that were big on the campaign trail, where it was Trump was going to get rid of taxes on overtime and taxes on tips, and that happened, but there's still some caveats here. So let's talk a little bit.
Yeah, it's it's really a deduction that you get at your personal tax return level, and so it's if you have it's basically about $25,000 is what we're talking about for married people, of a maximum deduction for either the overtime or for the tips, and they're trying, and that is really, it goes back to now January of 2025, and so it's just going to be extra information, we believe, provided on your W-2 that would then allow you to take this deduction again on your personal return. So yeah, it definitely helps, but your payroll taxes, like your Social Security and Medicare taxes, it's still going to be subject to that type of tax. It's just the income tax that you get this deduction. So
if I'm a waitress, a waiter or something like that, and I'm working someplace, and I get, what'd you say the deduction was? 25,000.
25,000. Yeah.
25,000. So if I get $70,000 tip from the course of the year, then I have to pay back your 5,000. How would it work?
Yeah, so it does start to phase out once you go over. These are pretty big numbers. If you're single, $150,000, $300,000 for joint. It is only in effect for 2025 and through 2028. So it's one of these things that does sunset. Yeah, you can get it up. You can get up to a $25,000 deduction for the tip income. So,
on the overtime side of it, a little bit about that.
Yeah, overtime, the phase out is basically the same, 150,000, 300,000. So again, big numbers, but just for easy math, because I can't do math that easily, $30 an hour, right? Just say somebody's making that. If you get, paid $45 instead, right? That's the time and a half, right? That $15, that portion would be a deduction, again, up to 25,000. Again, it's on your personal tax return. It's handled at that level. It doesn't change. For those familiar, like with your box one is what is taxable wages. We believe that's still going to show the same number because that's still your gross income. It's just you get this deduction at your personal return level. But again, it does go back to January of 2025. But both of these are only in existence for 4 years, 2025 through 2028.
So we talked about those 4 things there.
Yep.
Those all start here. January, going back to January 2025.
Yep.
There's a big chunk of the bill section of the bill that starts in 2026. Is there anything in there tax-wise that you looked at that won't be in effect till 2026?
I guess nothing too crazy. I guess the other one I wanted to mention, Casey, was back to these campaign promises. Is you get this deduction if you're over age 65 and taking Social Security. That got quite a bit of press. So that's an above the line deduction of $6,000 per person. So it's, again, not all of your Social Security would be tax exempt, but you get this extra deduction of either $6,000 or $12,000 if you're married. But again, that's another one of those that's effective for 25, 26, 27, and 28. So it's hard to keep track of all this stuff, but
it's tax on a tax you had to pay. That's right. That's good news.
Yeah. Right? Back to your question, a lot of the energy credits and things in 2026, are not going to be available. Like some of your residential energy credits, like the solar credits and this stuff. Yeah. There could be a few exceptions, but a lot of those energy credits kind of go away in 2026. So,
right. Anything else you want to make sure we cover?
I think that covers it. There's still, things to figure out and rules to come out, interpretations of, what things mean. But yeah, probably, reach out to your tax preparer. Obviously, what you read online may not be accurate. There's artificial intelligence, and SICKITCH, we're big believers in artificial intelligence. We're a technology company at our heart, but you do see some things out there that, you read and it may not be correct. So, go to your professionals and also allow them some time as the rules come out, because it's going to be complex. At least we've got, a number of months here now to do real tax planning, right? And figure out how we want to handle these next few years. Otherwise, we were just concerned it was going to be December 23rd, when this law got passed, and there just wasn't enough time to react. So reach out to your professionals and take some time and think through what your next few years are going to be, particularly for those folks who may be closer to retirement. Definitely some opportunity to take advantage of now these, permanent tax rules. So,
Okay. All right, Glenn, good stuff, man. On the podcast, if folks want to reach out to you, get more information, just talk about see which way to do that.
yeah, it's probably best just to call our office here in Peoria, Illinois. That's 309-694-4251.
45. Well, Glenn, I appreciate you being back on. We'll get you back on again. More regular. A lot of moving parts here. Just about the time I think we got everything figured out. So, Glenn, I appreciate you being on, man.
Well, appreciate it, Casey. Thank you.
Take care. Stay tuned for more moving on podcast after these messages.
Farm Journal is going to hold the first ever Yield Academy for 2025. It's going to happen August 21st in Rochester, Minnesota. Listen to this group. Real advice from folks who walked out in the fields. Ken Ferry, David Hula, Randy Dowdy, and we will get some market outlook from Dan Bossi at Ag Resource as well. Get the latest on what's working in agronomy, equipment, and marketing today. And that is the last day of Crop Tour 2025. So stick around for the final meeting that night in Rochester. Just Google Farm Journal Yield Academy, and that will take you to the homepage for the event.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Got Aaron Fintel on here to talk about what's happening in the world of equipment. Aaron, how you doing?
Good. Had America's birthday, last week, and we're getting into we started high plains harvesting down in the southern portion of our area and creeping north here. So,
yep, it is that time of
White
year.
combine shows up every day, mid-afternoon like it does, but so far so good.
That is the fun part of where we live, isn't it?
It is.
You never know what's going to come where, right?
If it gets up to 85, it's going to rain.
Right.
And if it rains, it will have at least 3 tink, tink, tink.
Right. Yeah. It's always a hailstone in there for sure. You're also in your world that you live in. You're also the CEO, the Chief Entertainment Officer of High Plains Wholesale.
I am.
And you can find some pretty hot deals there.
The roam around nitwit, if you will.
And I will. That's a lot of accuracy in that market.
No, been doing some videos here and there for that deal, which is honestly kind of fun, kind of neat to do that and give a little spiel about each thing we're doing. So just good. Just keeping with it,
Yep. There's a lot of cool stuff going
being
on.
Being social on the media.
That's right. There's a lot of good deals there it's thrown out. So guys, check that out. You find it Facebook at
Facebook, TikTok, and then on my personal Twitter, I put that same video on there. So
okay.
Since it's not intellectual property.
Well, you're in it. You're in it, so there's not a lot of intellectual property there.
See, I was going to get myself, but I knew old Case wouldn't let me down there. So, no, we High Plains Wholesale Equipment is on. We have a page on Facebook. We put those videos on and some other specials, and TikTok, and then on @Aaron Fintel on Twitter. We have the same video specials and whatnot. So,
right on.
Getting stuff pasted everywhere, man.
Right on. That's awesome. Well, keep banging there. So I think today I thought we talk a little bit about something that I think is it's a constant on the farm and the ranch and everything else, and that's skid steers, compact utility equipment, um, uh,
Oh yeah.
wheel loaders, those kind of things, that are just kind of out there a little bit. But I think one of the things that you see the most on any operation is a skid steer, and they have the versatility in those things. It's bigger than just moving dirt around like that. You clean the stuff up. You're drilling pulse holes. You're doing all kinds of stuff with them. And what I like about a skid steer is that, for the most part, a skid steer there's two different worlds that they come from. One is obviously buy a new one and you put that on the farm, or there's a lot of instances where you find that 2,500 hour to 5,000 hour 3 to 5 year old skid steer that's coming out of a construction application, and you see that get out of the farm.
Right.
One thing about a skid steer, I would say, all things considered, the depreciation on those is wildly different than you see depreciation on something else. It's a lot more. There's
sometimes
a lot of
it's backwards.
Sometimes it's backwards, yeah. But it feels like that mid-level life that you see in most machines, that 3 to 5 year range, where you're really starting to see what kind of midlife for a machine when you're looking at about a 10-year schedule. That's when you start seeing that level out. But that leveling out of that skid steer stays there a lot longer than you see other things stay there, where it's just kind of like, hey, this is now a $25,000 skid steer forever type of thing. I guess as you're looking at that, Aaron, talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you see in the skid steer market right now.
Oh yeah, for sure. To your point, excuse me. To your point about versatility and being on just about every operation and all that, on my teeny tiny sheep operation, I got a skid loader in, I want to say 2011, and I will not be without one ever again.
Yeah.
There was even a year in there I didn't farm, but I had a skid loader.
Yeah.
And it's that thing, you see them, you don't have one, you think, boy, it'd be nice to have one, but in and out and this and that, and then you actually have one and utilize it for 1 hour. 1 hour on the place, and it cannot leave.
Yeah.
There's just those jobs for it.
Yep.
To your point, in my operation, I started with a 753 Bobcat, which is kind of what used to be a mid-size rig. And when I upgraded, I went for the exact rig you're talking about, that 5 to 10 years old. I want the biggest one because I want to be able to lift anything a skid loader should be able to lift. And it's got to have some hours on it to get the price down.
Right.
That's the exact machine I bought. Interesting point. You can find some neat things in there, right? My skid loader came out of Indiana and is completely labeled in French, as it was sold new in Quebec.
Oh, right on. Yep.
Yeah. So I can't read a decal in the cab, but it's a conversational piece, if nothing else. I know gazole means diesel.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
That I do know. But yeah, in the marketplace, especially going for ag, man, you get to that 5 to 10 year period and honestly on skid loaders are not being left out of the party of getting over fancied, if you will.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And none of that fancy stuff is added for free.
But yeah, they tend to have a cost with those.
Right. So we're to the point now, skid loaders have carpet and leather seat and air ride seat and all this. And when they first came out with a skid loader with suspension, period, on a seat,
right,
which was approximately a 1/4 inch of travel,
right,
everybody was thrilled,
Well, if you've been in a skid steer, when it gets to hopping, that does have
stop.
Just
stop.
But
Let
for
go.
That 10 seconds that you're riding that out, that's a rough ride when you're in them old,
but
bolted down seats.
When you get that old girl bucking, there is not a seat suspension that's going to smooth it out either.
That's true. Yeah.
There's in the marketplace, there gets to be that gap. You have your for us, where we're up and down the front range, that big skid loader, which more often than not in the ag application, I would say probably 85 to 90% skid loaders are bought used. And I would say that same percentage is mid-size all the way up.
Yeah.
It's very rarely is it ever a little one. Where you'll see that in ag would be very specific livestock duties. At a dairy, in a narrow alley, chicken barns, that kind of thing. So with the marketplace, you have that gap where that guy goes and gets a new 333 with all the bells and whistles on it, that he trades it, he hits 1,000 hours, he trades it for a new one. But that is about 50% too much of what the next guy wants,
Right.
So there's actually with where the new skid loaders are at, it's almost where instead of the second owner going to ag, it's almost third owner.
Right.
Just because it's not, if it's I take that back to a point. On a non-livestock farm, it drops to the third owner because that machine for that job has had a pretty constant price point threshold for a long time, because it doesn't go to the field, so it's a little harder to justify type of rig,
Right. Yep.
So I see a lot of that in the marketplace, whereas the ranch, the feedlot, any livestock operation, that is a focal point machine. It's an everyday machine. Even on the cow-calf ranch in the middle of the sand hills.
Sure.
Once they have it, they're going to use that thing every day. There's just a job. That's how it works.
Well,
Once they show up, they're always busy.
Well, that and the attachments that you can put on them, right? I mean, you got post hole diggers, you got mowers, you just run down the list, right? I've seen...
and there's only so much to do on the crop farm,
Sure,
Pick and move stuff around the yard and that kind of thing. Move snow, dig a little this, dig a little that. But on the ranch, it's a constant everyday thing. Ranch, feedlot, any livestock operation.
Yep. Post hole driver, bucket.
Right.
Have that lucky guy that used to hold the post while the bucket comes down on top of it. Always like that guy. I watch him when he's driving down the road, and that guy is like, man, you really trust the guy driving that skid steer, don't you?
Exactly.
A lot of trust right there in that relationship.
Right.
But if you look at how all those things play together, the thing about a skid steer is that you see more and more diversity, just like everything else you've seen, kind of the evolution of equipment on the farm, where there were certain things that you had a certain machine for that was only doing a single thing. And you're seeing so much more of that diversity now coming into the equipment that's on the farm, seeing more of that stuff come in, because, I mean, it's not like skid steers have been sheltered from amazing price increases over the last 5 years, right? From where they used to be at to where they're at now is it's mind blowing to see a $100,000, $150,000 skid steer. You know what I mean? That's to watch that come across the screen there when you're looking at sold stuff is just like, holy crap, man. There's so much stuff that's there that it kind of blows your mind a little bit as to what the overall marketplace looks like. So,
but even tech.
Yeah.
Your favorite thing, tech. Sure. You can load them things up with tech too.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily auto track and swath control, but
yeah, you can.
But they have their versions of that. I mean, it's all there.
Yeah, they have what's that, iGrade or whatever that's called. That's on your site, that you can put on there. So
Surface Water Pro,
all that stuff. I mean, so when you start looking at, like in our neck of the woods, not very many people do this, but to some extent, where they're doing some finish work, if they're grading a field or something, they put a terrace in or something like that. You see those big lane levers on the front of those things where they're leveling out stuff in front of them. So
they got the receivers on each side of the. Mm-hmm. It's like a big backward box blade with a wheel out in front.
Yeah, for sure. So
and that's all done with tech. Yep.
Yeah, it's ever changing. So when you watch those things move now, and you start looking at everything else that you start putting out there, I mean, you're seeing more and more on the bigger side of the mini excavator. You know, you're starting to see some of that pop in there, but they're also looking at, again, a 5,000 hour, 6,000 hour, 3,000 hour excavator that they can put on the farm and use to
A full size
one. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you're looking at some bigger stuff there. So it's an ever evolving place.
And you know what? Almost every discussion I've ever had about an excavator on a farm starts with that little one.
Yeah.
They see that and go, man, that'd be handy. We could dig out, we could dig some pipelines for hydrants and blah, 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 and this kind of thing. And then it goes, well, if we wanted to pull out some trees or something,
Right.
I need a big one. And then the next thing you know, there's the 15-year-old full size showing up on an RGN. And, well, we just decided it was time.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
If you like the equipment, there's guys that don't want no business of that, and they'll buy somebody else's just to have him come run it and not have to babysit it and all that. But there's a lot of places where, well, if we're going to pay that bill, why don't we just go get that rig and do it ourselves?
Yep, for sure.
And then if we don't use it, we'll sell it again ourselves, and it's just on down the line. But that is something in the last 20 years that has really, really increased, is the amount of yellow iron on farm to do certain jobs.
Yeah, for sure. You're seeing primarily wheel loaders, obviously, because those are, especially you have cattle and this kind of thing. You see a lot of feeding done with the wheel loader.
Oh yeah,
and that kind of stuff.
Even crop guys.
Yeah,
plenty of crop guys have wheel loaders just for specific jobs.
Yep. Yep. And they have you look at like motor graders, right?
Oh yeah.
And a lot of that too is the amount of roads that have to be maintained before you get to the county road. And that's what I mean? That's, in some instances, that's, especially out in our neck of the woods, I mean, you might have 12 miles to the road.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. In our neck of the woods. That's not really a I-state problem. But
no.
Out here in God's country,
yeah,
it's life.
Yeah. You might drive 12 miles just to get to the county road to drive another 12 miles to the highway. And, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of situations like that. So, okay. All right, man. Probably a good place to stop. Aaron, folks want to get more information from you about High Plains Wholesale and the stuff you're doing there. What's the easiest way to do that?
Well, you can look up High Plains Wholesale on Facebook, on TikTok, and look me up on Twitter at Aaron Fintel. I am also also personally on Facebook, so you can reach me out there. You can email me, afintel@21equip.com, or just call me, text me, 308-760-1193.
Right on. I appreciate you being on the podcast. I'm Casey Seymour. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the stuff at Moving Iron LLC or Moving Iron Podcast 1. Go to AgWeb to listen to the audio version of this, and go over to the Farm Journal YouTube channel. You can see the video version of the podcast over there. Also want to thank Sean Haggett, Greg Machinery Peterson, Alex Kerr from Kerr Auctions, and I want to thank Aaron for being on the podcast. So until next time, I'm Casey Seymour. Let's go some iron, folks. Out.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, Moving Iron is available on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere podcasts are found. So until next time, let's move some iron.